I'm Dareth Morrissey. I'm with the board on of ACS Orange County, and we've got board member Larry LaFranc here as well. And then we are partnering with our Monterey Bay chapter. And so we've got Diane Glim saying hello. So welcome all Monterey Bay ACS people. We really appreciate you having. And the star of the show is on somebody's lap right now. Oh, see, that was Giles. Yeah. It's Eva, the wonder dog. So we've got Dr. Deborah Giles, who goes by Giles, here to present our talks this evening. And I just wanted to let you know a couple of things about the series that we have this year. The whole entire year's blocked off. So I don't know if you can see that. We've got next month Dr. Kristen Landry, who is talking about narwhals and her request polar bears too. So it's all on Arctic mammals, and Dr. David Weller from NOAA talking about gray whales, and Ian Kerr, the originator of Snotbot, the CEO himself, coming and talking about all of the tags that they're doing with all the drones and Snotbot and everything else. And then we've got aquatic mammals of South America, which is whales and dolphins and manatees, which is going to be a first for us. So I'm so excited for that. And Dr. Diane Gendron, she was part of that blue whale film that came out in LA. And so she's going to be talking about her whale research, blue whale research down in Mexico. Joy Riedenberger, who's a former ACS conference person, she's a hoot and a half, and that is going to be on whale necropsies. And Ari Freelander, you guys might have heard of him before, so he'll be talking about his research in Antarctica. And Ted Cheeseman, who will be Dr. Ted Cheeseman by then, doing bellwethers of change, humpback whales. And then Ed Lyman, who splits his time between Juneau and Maui, works for NOAA Fisheries. He's the large whale entanglement response coordinator. So please make sure you sign up for all of our emails so you get registration links for that. And I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about everything, but I just want to say Giles, who goes by her first name, Science and Research Director of Wild Orca, degree from UC Davis, dissertation on her focus on federally listed southern resident killer whales, and worked in lecturer and resident science at the University of Washington, the Friday Harbor Labs. Hopefully some of you have had the chance to be there on the San Juan Islands and go out. And she teaches marine mammals of the Salish Sea and marine biology there as well. And so she's got a pretty interesting dog on her lap that is able to detect and let everybody know where we have feces that is floating on the surface from whales, so you'll hear more about it. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you so much. And she's falling asleep, so I'm going to show her off for a second and then
you bet.
Baby girl.
Thank you.
Aww. That's the best way to start a webinar ever. Puppy kisses.
Thanks for the hearts and the happy faces there, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak for these chapters in California, the ACS chapters in California. I'm originally from California, Sacramento. I did my undergrad, master's, and PhD at UC Davis. Just a big fan of the UC system and the state system. And actually, one of my favorite colleges was a community college in Sacramento. So I'm so happy to be speaking to California people. Also, one of the main things, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, as far as the distribution of where the whales go, Washingtonians like to claim the southern residents as our own whales, but they're really not. They go all the way down to Monterey, and all the way up occasionally, at least once, to Southeast Alaska. And so one of the big things that we do at Wild Orca is to promote the fact that these are Washington's whales, Oregon's whales, California's whales. They're really nobody's whales. But we all are hopefully equally invested in the recovery of this population. So I'm really excited to be able to give this talk here. I'm going to go ahead and show a PowerPoint presentation. I'll try and move through it rather quickly. This is a presentation that's mostly geared for people that do know something about southern residents, but aren't maybe super up to date on the most recent information. So I can provide that. And then we'll have, because I can't see you, And I don't know who's asking questions. We'll just go ahead and save questions for the end. So can you guys see this slide? I can't hear anybody.
Yes, I can see the slide.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Um, again, I'm Giles. I go by my last name. I'm the Science and Research Director at the nonprofit Wild Orca. And our field research, we dubbed it the Southern Resident Killer Whale Health Monitoring Program. My contact information is down there at the bottom, and at the very end, I'll have another slide with that information as well. I almost was not able to give this talk, and Dareth was very generous in just letting me move through my grief. I did want to do just a very brief dedication of this talk and much of my work to a colleague and dear friend, Susan Anderson, who passed away on Saturday. I was very fortunate to get to spend time with her a week ago today. She died fairly unexpectedly. She was ill, but she died fairly unexpectedly. Susan was deeply devoted to the southern resident killer whales, and for many, many years, she offered her generously offered her educational skills and her incredible graphic skills and talents to outreach and education efforts. She was a founding member of the Salish Sea Ecosystem Advocates and the Bold Action Coalition, and volunteered with many groups up here in the San Juans and Washington State, including Wild Orca. She was our education coordinator. She also volunteered with Orca Network, Sound Action, Orca Behavior Institute, and the Orca Salmon Alliance. She was a key member of the Orca Month planning team for several years and set up our new website for both Orca Month and the Orca Salmon Alliance. She was always eager to help in any way she could. And even a week ago today on our OSA call, she was taking on new projects to work on. She will be incredibly, deeply missed by her family, colleagues, and so many friends. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to just give a huge shout out to this amazing woman. So Susan would love this title, this slide here. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. My joke and a true joke is that this slide, this quote here from Walt Disney was actually just part of the template for PowerPoint, but I liked it so much, and it really does stand in for a lot of the way that I really feel like we need to be thinking about the natural world and especially the southern residents. So I think I'll probably leave this slide in for forevermore. Our mission at Wild Orca is to translate science into action to save the endangered southern resident killer whales from extinction. And we do this with three different pillars, three different avenues that we do our work. Our first one is the conservation research, and this is where we go out on the water, utilizing the superpowers of a scent detection dog to help us sniff out killer whale feces, as well as humpback and gray and minke and other cetaceans. But really our focus is the endangered southern resident killer whale population. We collect the feces off the water and analyze it for a whole host of things that we can look at. It's just really kind of the sky's the limit as far as what you can learn from a fecal sample. I'll talk more about that as we go on. The next pillar, the next avenue in which we engage our work is through our strategic advocacy. And what this means is, like tonight, doing talks, going into schools, participating in panel discussions. I was fortunate, for example, to be invited to be part of the Washington Governor Inslee's Killer Whale Recovery Task Force in 2018 and 19. So we engage in that way by providing expert testimony, information, trying to provide the best up-to-date information to the public and through education efforts like that. And then lastly, through our policy engagement. So we're actively engaged with and have regular meetings with elected officials, quite often at the state level, both our state representatives, but also our congressional representatives in DC. And I have had the opportunity to visit with a lot of elected officials, and thankfully now they're looking to us to provide the best available, most recent up-to-date science. And so for that, I'm very thankful. So all of these different avenues work together, hopefully to be able to help us achieve our mission again of saving the southern resident killer whales from extinction. So I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar are aware of who the southern resident killer whales are, but just very briefly, it's one clan of killer whales. Within that clan, it's called J Clan. Under the umbrella of J Clan are three pods: J pod, K pod, and L pod. And in total, there are only 75 individual killer whales living at this point. And this includes a new baby born in December, J60. He's a male born to is a little confusing for a while, but we do think right now that this is the offspring of J42, part of the J16 matriline. So this is a population of killer whales that only eats fish. Preferentially, they're focusing on Chinook salmon, the largest and most lipid-rich, fattiest of the 5 salmon species found in the Pacific. They do eat coho chum, some steelhead, some other species of fish, but they never eat pink salmon, unfortunately, because sometimes those guys can be really kind of hyper abundant every other year. Pink salmon are the boniest, least lipid-rich fish, and the whales just evolved to seek out the largest, we think, swim bladders, which would have belonged to the very, very large, at least in the past, very large Chinook salmon. So under the umbrella of the one clan, the J Clan, all of these whales essentially speak the same language with their pod dialect. So it's almost like, I like to think of it as like a Valley Girl dialect for one pod, maybe a southeastern, New England sort of accent for another pod, and I don't know, maybe a Midwest pod accent for the third group. So they're speaking the same language, but they have some words that are unique to their pods that are not shared between the pods. But generally, they're speaking the same language and can understand each other. Conversely, the Biggs killer whales, or formerly called transient killer whales, that occur up here in the Northeast Pacific. These are mammal-eating killer whales that occur sometimes in the water at the same time. There's no interbreeding between these ecotypes of killer whales, and they don't speak the same language. They certainly don't eat the same food. So really unique. And it's because these whales are so insular that they were actually able to be listed on the endangered species list as a distinct population within the overall killer whale genus species. So all killer whales worldwide are called Orcinus orca, just like all humans are Homo sapiens. But we now know from genetics and from cultural distinctions that these whales really worldwide, there are at least 10 ecotypes of killer whales, honestly, probably many more than that, that should be subdivided into at least, subspecies. Uko Gorder and I have had conversations about this, and there is a move to designate different ecotypes as subspecies. So that'll be less confusing when kind of officially we get around to doing that. So the southern resident range, when the whales were listed in 2005, they did not have designated critical habitat. Fairly quickly after that, in 2006, the summer core critical habitat was designated in the inland waters of the Salish Sea. You can see that in the orange color. And then it took until 2021, so long time later, for the outer coast critical habitat to be designated for this population. And you can see here that it actually goes all the way down to Point Sur, so just south of Monterey is the official designated critical habitat for the outer coast for southern residents. And then all the way up here to the north, Haida Gwaii, also known as Queen Charlotte Islands. Again, in the listing documents, when these whales were listed, their range actually goes all the way up to Southeast Alaska. But really, they don't go up there too much. J-pod was seen up there in 2007, and certainly they may go up there and just aren't spotted or aren't identified as southern residents. But I kind of like that their critical habitat officially, according to NOAA, is all the way up to Southeast Alaska because um, it's just important to know that these whales can range. So, oh, no, I'm not advancing. Am I? Okay. So the southern residents are, as all ecotypes of killer whales, are incredibly intelligent, culturally rich populations of animals that occupy this planet along with us. The southern residents are known to engage in this behavior called kelping. I would say other populations engage in this as well, but not at all to the degree that the southern residents do. I've seen them seek out this middle picture is a picture of J45 when this whale was born. Shortly after this whale was born, was just kind of dropped off in a kelp bed, a free floating kelp bed that while mom went off with the rest of the group and foraged nearby. And this animal just played in that kelp for about an hour. It was really amazing to see. They seek out kelp. They roll around in kelp. This is a picture over here on the left of J2, the oldest known killer whale ever to have lived, also known as Granny. And she spent about 45 minutes barrel rolling up the west side of San Juan in front of Limekiln State Park, also known as Whale Watch Park. And you can really see how close they come in there sometimes. And she was just, it seemed like luxuriating in this kelp. This was anchored kelp. So really interesting. We do know from captive studies that killer whale skin is very sensitive. They can feel it, just a finger rubbed across their skin. So these guys up here in this part of the world do not suffer from things like barnacles or diatoms or lice or anything like that. So they're not trying to knock that off necessarily, but we just think they do it because it feels good. Another thing that they engage in, which we don't actually get to see too much here in the inland waters of the Salish Sea, I hope this occurs when the populations, when the pods come into contact with one another after having been separated for some amount of time. And this is a very interesting behavior that we've seen where each pod will line up. They line up kind of touching each other's pec fins. So you'll have all of J pod lined up facing off against K pod or L pod, whichever pod has come into the area. It's often J pod is here more kind of first in the season. J pod is definitely the most resident of our resident 3 pods here in Washington, inland waters of the Salish Sea. But anyway, when you get this greeting ceremony, these whales will rush towards each other, covering miles sometimes at top speed until they get within maybe 50 to 200 meters of each other. And then you'll get these lines of the 2 pods. Or it might be 2 pods facing the new 3rd pod that's just come into the inland waters. And they just hover there for a while and just kind of stare at each other. We don't really know what's going on. There's not a lot of vocalizations happening during this time. But then after some cue happens, we don't really know what that is. Suddenly you'll just end up with this crazy whale ball of all the whales coming together and rolling around with each other. And the males will go off and play and sword fight. And the females, older females will go off together. Pregnant females will be surrounded by other pregnant females and females coming into estrus for the first time. And you'll have all the calves out playing and friends that we now know from some really cool research that the Center for Whale Research is doing, that these animals have best friends. They have long-term friendships that occur over lifetimes. And those guys will go off and visit. And it's just a spectacular thing to be honored to witness. Again, we don't get to see it too much these days because we often don't have all 3 pods or even 2 pods in the inland waters because there's just not enough fish here to bring them in and keep them here. So as I mentioned before, the whales were listed in 2005 in the United States. And this is kind of a talk in its own, like how that listing happened. But suffice it to say, out of all of the threats facing this population of animals, 3 percolated to the top. First one being the lack of prey, specifically Chinook salmon, vessel presence and associated noise. So just a tremendous amount of vessel traffic in the inland waters of the Salish Sea. You can see this amazing photo here of J27 in front of this ocean-going tanker coming up the west side of San Juan, heading for the port of Vancouver. And then toxicants. So man-made chemicals of all kinds making their way mainly from the terrestrial realm and into the marine realm, through the food web and up into the whales. All of these threats, including it being a small population, so potential inbreeding depression, and I want to talk about that later too. All of these threats work together kind of synergistically in a negative way to impact these whales. But by far, the worst problem, the biggest threat, is the lack of prey. Because when the whales are not getting enough to eat, we know that all of these other threats are exacerbated. So these whales, as I mentioned, are fish eaters. They only eat fish. They are mostly Chinook salmon specialists. And back as these whales were co-evolving with Pacific salmon over tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, these whales were preferentially foraging on Chinook salmon, which in the past would have been massive. Fish coming out of the Snake River, which is a very, very high elevation, cold water river that is the beginning of the Snake River is at the base of the Teton Mountains in Wyoming. And then it flows through Oregon and in between Washington and, it goes through Idaho and then flows through the Columbia and goes between Oregon and Washington. Fish coming out of the Snake River would have been massive. I've got some pictures to show you in a minute. But this is beautiful. These are fish-eating killer whales. They co-evolved eating these massive fish, and they co-evolved cultural traits like cooperatively hunting and sharing food. That's both touching and heartbreaking when you recognize that these whales are continuing these cultural traits like sharing food, catching a fish and breaking it in half and sharing it with a family member, even with the fact that they're individually starving to death. This picture here on the right is a picture of J2, again, otherwise known as Granny. And this is one of the last photos of her taken in December of 2016 from our colleagues at SR3. John Durbin and Holly Fernbach took this drone imagery of J2 teaching her great grandson how to forage on this fish because his mother had died earlier in 2016. So again, beautiful cultural bonds. These whales are tightly bonded with each other, within their families, within their pods, and within their clan, to the point where they're again, hungry and yet continuing these cultural traits. This is an image out of Linda Mape's book, Shared Waters. It's called Orca, Shared Water, Shared Future. And it's a fabulous book if you're at all interested in knowing more about the Southern residents. This book was years in the making, and she just did a fantastic job really telling the story of why these whales are declining over time and really what we need to do about it. She was able to capture that by extensive interviews with all of us doing research on this population from the federal kind of management level all the way down to field biologists such as myself. This is an image out of that book showing the rivers of importance for the Southern residents, and really we're able to see that so many of these runs of salmon are on the endangered species list themselves, even all the way down into California. So I told you about the large, massive salmon that the whales co-evolved with. This picture up here at the top depicts two fish that would have most assuredly come from the Snake River, which again is a tributary to the Columbia. These fish were caught at the turn of the last century in 1910. This is 116 pound and 121 pound Chinook salmons. Two of these salmon hanging here by these men that are probably, people were shorter back then too. These are 5-foot tall salmon, just incredible monstrously big salmon. And the larger picture on the left shows kind of what the problem was, where the problem started. And this was when humans became very, very efficient at essentially industrial fishing. And industrial fishing, obviously, for you folks in Monterey, you grow up and steeped in the history of the decline of the sardine and even herring and all kinds of from this very, very small fish all the way up to large fish. So even tuna, pretty much every fish in the sea is targeted and easily preyed upon by humans. And this photo is a picture of sockeye salmon, 50,000, estimated 50,000 sockeye salmon in one haul being canned in this cannery. These men are knee or thigh deep in salmon here. Lots and lots of other reasons why salmon populations and other species of fish are declining, and I'm happy to talk about that more at the end when we do Q&A. Yeah, I want to ask a question during Q&A related to this. This is an image. I need to get this updated. This is data compiled by Jane Cogan, a citizen scientist that has meshed together information from the Center for Whale Research, which is the organization responsible for the census of the southern resident killer whales. So what you have here on the top is a bar chart, a negative bar chart. So the longer the purple bar here, the more deaths of the southern residents per year. And then down here, each of these colors represents a river of importance for the southern residents. So these are Chinook salmon rivers, and all the way from Central California down near where some of you are, all the way up to Southeast Alaska. The overall take home for this graph here is that when you look at these colors down here with the rivers kind of as a shape, showing peaks with high numbers of salmon, like up here, over 6 million salmon that year, which would have been in the mid 80s, compared to lower years where it's down below 3 million. And just, it's quite simply that when there's low numbers of salmon, we have high numbers of deaths in the southern resident population that year, or very slightly lagged. So it's really that simple. When we don't have enough coastwide Chinook salmon abundance, the southern resident population suffers in the form of deaths, early disease and death. So what are we doing to try and address some of this? So Wild Orca, again, this is our conservation research, our non-invasive conservation research, collecting fecal samples from the whales to be able to say what's happening on the inside of them by studying what's coming out. This research was pioneered by Dr. Sam Wasser at the University of Washington. He started this program back in 2007 and passed it on to me in 2021, end of 2021, and Wild Orca took up the project at that point. I started working for this project in 2009 as I was finishing up actually I was still working on my master's at that time. No, sorry, just starting to do the analysis for my PhD by 2009. And I'm just really honored that Sam passed the project on to us. In a lot of ways, it's easier to do this work outside of the academic realm for all kinds of reasons. And Sam is still a senior advisor for our program. So this is a picture actually here of one of our past drivers, Sadie Youngstrom, current volunteer as well. And this is us holding the first humpback whale poop that EBA helped us find, which is very, very different than killer whale poop. I will tell you that. So our conservation research, we operate off of this bullfrog boat, 21-foot bullfrog boat. And then there's an adorable picture of Eva there looking like she's ready to roll and get to work. So people often want to know how it is that we find killer whale poop or whale poop. Excuse me. On the water. And essentially by utilizing a scent detection dog, we're able to stay really far away from the back end of the whales. The way that other researchers collect whale feces often is sometimes they'll use a drone, which we will be doing as well. We do that at some time during certain circumstances if the water's moving really fast, for example. But some researchers, especially on the outer coast, deal with a lot of the same things that we do as far as like the water moving very quickly. So drones can be used where you can stay away from the back end of the whale. The other way to be able to stay away from the back end of the whale is to utilize a scent detection dog. The other way to collect fecal samples is basically just to go in the fluke follow and follow very closely behind them. But one of the things that we want to look at are stress hormones. And so we don't want to be that boat out there that's stressing them out, or we at least want to minimize that potential. So the idea is that we get behind a group of whales, we get behind and to the side and downwind of them. And we're usually like about 400 or 500 meters behind them, so nowhere near them, where the acoustics of our motor is not going to impact them. And then in an idealized situation where to the side and behind and downwind, where the wind will come across their path, and in a perfect world, they've pooped a nice big fatty poop for us. They keep going, and then we Eba, by the series of kind of zigzags, will take us right to the poop. So she'll move to the front of the bow as we enter the scent cone, and as we start to get closer and closer to that red center part of the scent cone, she'll start getting very, very animated. And then maybe even as we pass by the strongest part of the scent cone, she might jump down off the front, like right here in this picture. She's standing on the bow, telling us, keep going forward, keep going forward. And then as we're getting closer and closer to the center of that scent cone, she'll start crab walking along the side of the boat, like, wait, 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 wait. And as we've passed it, then she'll jump down and try and go to the back of the boat. And then that's when we know to turn the boat around and go back on a 90-degree angle downwind, coming back on in the opposite direction. And it's that kind of zigzag motion where we end up, she takes us right to the scat sample. This is what poop looks like when they're well fed. This is very large. These are like plate size poops that are there. These are beautiful. We can collect these, analyze them for everything that we want to look at. But sometimes when the whales are not getting enough to eat, their feces is very watery and diffuse. And we end up sometimes not being able to see anything. Like sometimes we can smell it, but it's so washed out in the surf there or in the water that there's nothing to collect. Or sometimes it's so tiny, it's like the size of your nail, your fingernail. The Eba can still find that, which is just spectacular to us. And again, she's doing that from really far away, able to stay really far away and not bug her, and not bug the whales. So I hope this plays. This is what Eba does her work for. This is the entire reason why she wants to be out there. We use high play drive motivated dogs, dogs that are not necessarily food motivated because we don't want to have to keep them hungry. These are dogs that are just very passionate about their toy. We've actually moved in this video. You see her playing with a Kong on a rope. We realized that it wasn't even the Kong that she was that interested in. It was just the rope. And so we always have line on the boat. So we always have a toy for her. So hopefully this plays.
Get it, Eba, get it. Good job. Good girl.
So she just looked up when I was saying, where she could hear the video, and she was like, what's happening? So this is a list of just some of the things. This is most of what we look for, but there are some new things that we've added that we're looking at as well. So we can, obviously, we know what species we're behind. We can tell the identity of the whale that left us the sample. We can tell if it's a female, if she's pregnant, and not only if she's pregnant, but how pregnant, because different sex hormones associated with different stages of pregnancy change over time. We can look at their nutrition status by looking at how, basically what those nutrition hormones are looking like. We can tell stress levels. We're partnering with, I've got a slide for that, looking at parasites. I'm also going to be looking at microplastics, information about the gut microbiome. We know that's really important now. It's like our second brain. Just a tremendous amount of information that we can get from just one fecal sample if it's big enough. And some of our findings to date are showing that the lack of prey, again, specifically Chinook salmon, is leading to almost 70% pregnancy failure in this population. So it's 69.8% of the females who are getting pregnant in this population that we've gotten samples from, which is a lot. These are females that are losing their pregnancy, and those females that are losing their pregnancy are nutritionally deprived. So again, this is how these threats are working synergistically. Another example is when the whales are not getting enough to eat, we see an amplification of the toxicants in their feces. So because they're a living animal, just like you and me, when we're not getting enough to eat, we start metabolizing our fat stores that releases toxicants that are locked up there. And in a lot of cases, safely, when we get enough to eat, those we lock up the toxicants, and the whales do too. But again, when they're not getting enough to eat, meaning every day, killer whales are mammals like we are. They have to eat every day to maintain optimal health. They are not like humpback whales or gray whales that are evolutionarily, adapted to go through long periods of fasting, and which is, those guys eat lower on the food chain. So just by definition, or by the very fact of lower on the food chain, means lower biomagnified toxicants. So it's not great that these baleen whales are metabolizing so much fat during parts of the year, but at least they're lower on the food chain because of what they eat. Again, increased stress hormones when they're not getting enough to eat, just like you and me. When we don't eat, we might get stuck in a traffic jam. Our stress hormones go through the roof, versus a day when we've had an opportunity to eat. That same traffic jam might not stress us out in the same way. So again, all of these things with the lack of prey, all of these different threats magnify, and it leads to disease and early death in this population. So I want to give just a huge, moment to recognize the complementary and collaborative work that researchers in this part of the world are doing on southern resident killer whales. We partner very closely, especially on the water when we're out there. We work very closely with each other to make sure that we're talking on the radio, that we're letting each other know which group of animals that we might be surveying. So that we're not kind of bunching up and having too many research boats on an already stressed out population of animals. So it's an agreement that we do not take data on the same population. We spread ourselves out, and also we share information. So we're working closely with the CDOC Society, which is working in collaboration with NOAA, Northwest Fisheries Science Center, and the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. These guys are out there collecting breath samples using a drone. You can kind of see it here if you squint. Very cool new drone technology, and working with some really, honestly, like NASA rocket scientists to develop the best way to collect breath from these killer whales. These guys also, we share fecal samples with them. They're looking at some bacteria, as well as some parasite information from the feces that we're collecting. We also work, like I said, SR3, Sea Life Response Rehabilitation and Research. These guys are out there doing drone work, doing photogrammetry, being able to measure these whales. You can see really clearly an animal that is maybe in a little bit less healthy state. You can see this a little bit by the eye patch, versus a female that's very, very heavily pregnant. Unfortunately, this pregnancy was a failed pregnancy. So this is a late-term pregnancy with J22. Phenomenal mom. I was so hopeful that she was going to be able to bring this calf to bear, but she did not. Or at least, yeah, this baby was one of the 70% losses. And then here's another very cool drone imagery. The Center for Whale Research is continuing on with the census information that they take. That they do 2 censuses. The official census is July 1. And then the unofficial census at the end of the year. They're the ones that keep track of how many whales there are and give them their alphanumeric designation. So that is ongoing work, continuing work. And then the additional work that they're doing now focuses more on drone collected video, looking at very, very cool social dynamics with the southern resident killer whales, as well as Biggs killer whales. And then a paper that we had, a collective paper, there were 20 of us authors that came out last year, at the end of last year, called Focenicide. This is the killing or at least harassing of porpoise by fish-eating killer whales. Really interesting phenomenon. We do have this extensive authorship was because we reached out to killer whale researchers in other places that study fish-eating killer whales to see if they had any accounts. And yes, Southeast Alaskan Dina and Craig Matkin were able to provide some information from of just a few instances of Southeast Alaskan fish-eating killer whales. And then our colleagues up at the top of Vancouver Island in Canada provided, again, just one or two accounts of northern resident fish-eating killer whales. But we have over 70 accounts of the southern resident fish-eating killer whales engaging in this behavior. Really interesting. This paper is open access, so anybody that is interested in this behavior, feel free to download that, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. So in summary, want to leave enough time. At Wild Orca, we're my background is in conservation biology, and so through that lens, we really recognize that this killer whales have intrinsic value and intrinsic right to exist on the planet. Again, they've been here for a lot longer than humans have, foraging on Pacific salmon a lot longer than we have. And everything that's threatening this population is essentially our fault. Not essentially, it's absolutely our fault. And so we're really dedicated to continuing our work to try and get the word out, continue our work so that we've got the best available, most recent data to provide to the public and policymakers. And if you want to get engaged, take action, we have our action guide. Right now, we have one action. We are just updating our website. We'll have essentially 3 actions. The one that's really seriously critical still, again, these are California's whales as well. They're Oregon's whales as well, or at least the responsibility of Californians and Oregonians, as well as Washingtonians and people around the world, to save this population of whales. And one of the ways that we can do this is really pushing for the restoration of the Snake River by removing these 4 Snake River dams that are blocking some of the best, especially in the light of climate change. The most cold water, high elevation habitat is up there in the Snake River, 900 plus miles from the Pacific Ocean. Become a role model, become a mentor to others, educate yourselves like tonight, pass on that information to people that care. I used to get really stressed out about like, how do I get people that don't care about this population of whales? Because I literally have had just last week somebody say, what does it matter? There's killer whales all over the world. What does it matter that we've got this population that are dying? I want to educate those people as well, but if they're at that point where they're just, really not going to be driven to care, I've learned to turn my attention away from them, and I encourage you to as well. Get together, find your tribe, find your pod, and really get out there and get active and save the fish, and ultimately saving the whales. It's like, save the cheerleader, save the world, save the planet. My amazing team at Wild Orca, just everybody is a part of this. We have a lot of volunteers working with us as well. Amazing board of directors, and of course, Eva the whale dog. You can follow her on Instagram. She doesn't, the person that's supposed to be updating her account is very abysmal at that. I'm trying to work on that. But you can go there if you're interested. And then, as I said, we have just a huge number of people that live here on the island that volunteer their time to come out with us and help collect poop, which sounds awesome for some people and just crazy to other people. So I can't thank our volunteers enough. And of course, our supporters, Patagonia, if you can get your hands on the last magazine, it was the 50th anniversary of Patagonia, and Eva's the centerfold story in that. But all of these organizations have supported us so much. So there's my contact information again. You can look it up later. I think I want to close this out because I think if I close that, might be able to see you guys. I'm not sure. Well, I guess I can see our other hosts. So thank you so much. I hope that was comprehensible and educational.
Absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much.